Hi, welcome to Ms. Murphy's Flip Classroom for Character Development. Today I'll be working with you on character development for possible narratives in the future. In this lesson we'll talk about all the things that it takes to develop a well-distinguished character that will further your plotline along. Let's begin. Who are characters and what do they do? Well, characters tell and further stories. Characters actually make the story. Without characters, your story would probably be more similar to a landscape novel, describing backgrounds, scenic scenes, maybe a hurricane or a tornado, but not many characters involved. Characters also create connections for the reader. This can be for characters that resemble the reader or characters that don't resemble the reader and provide the reader with a way to enter a new world. When they create connections like this, it's more of an escape rather than an actual connection, as in, this is me, this is telling my story. So characters do a lot. Characters are also dynamic and multidimensional. When I say this, I am talking about characters who are confused and torn between being good and evil, or destiny, fate, and their choice in it, or how they're kind and strong, but they have weaknesses too. But then there are characters that are singular and one-dimensional, a villain that is always bad, or a good person that's always good, where you only see one kind of side of them, like Glenda the Good Witch or Lord Voldemort, until you get more of a background of who their characters are. They're storytellers, and characters tell these stories through so many different aspects of their life. They are well developed in action, how they do things, dialogue, how they say things, what they say, reactions to other characters, how they interact, do they work well together or not, the characters' personal thoughts, those inner monologues, what are they thinking that affects their story, a character's habits and hobbies, which we'll look into as some examples from books that we've read recently, possessions, physical description, which is so important to really get your reader imagining and connecting to your character, and also background. Where do you find your character when you enter this tale, this narrative, this story? So these are things we're going to be looking at and really diving into in this flipped classroom. How do characters act? Well, your character is going to be acting however you want. Does your character have a flight or fight system? Are they always constantly getting into battles? Are they fighting a lot? Or are they peacemakers? Are they breaking up fights? Or are they just people who enjoy a journey and love to walk and run around? Are they athletic? Do they show that through their actions? Also, you have to be thinking about what that action does for the story. Does it further the character's personality? Does it change the character's personality? And when you're talking about action, you want to think not only about their actual physical action, but how they're doing other things. Not only are they kicking, but are they passing things with shaky hands, or are they beaming with confidence and full of angst and excitement? And does their physical motion show that? Is someone pointing authoritatively, or are they cowering in the corner with chills and fear? These are things you're going to really want to think about when you're describing certain scenes between a character and another character, or a character interacting with its background, or just the character in itself. So overall, you really just need to think really great descriptions that work for your character's idea, especially in situations where your character's personality shows through their actions. They're not just walking through everyday things. They're not just picking up a glass on the top of the table or something similar to that. They're doing something that shows who they are. And that's really important. Also, you want to think about how your character talks. Does your character have an accent? Does your character have a shaky voice or a gargly voice or a voice of a chain smoker for the past 70 years? And you're going to want to create their language. Do they have a southern accent? Do they speak in slang? Short term, are they saying lol and saying things are funny but not actually laughing? And then also you gotta think about the noises they make. Does your character make random noises, or does your character always sigh when they see their loved one, or they make a weird click noise, or do they say a phrase that's very common for them? And also when you're thinking about what kind of voice do they have, you want to think about how they say things. Are they funny? Are they witty? Are they throwing one-liners out? Or are they snarky and sarcastic or rude or mean? And when you think about that, you also want to give the person an attitude, a personality in their voice. You're not going to want to say. You're going to want to say other ways of talking. For example, you're going to want to say boast or burst out with or things similar to this. You're going to want to really show something more. Character reaction interaction. So you have your character doing physical action, walking into a bar, and you're going to have him with his voice and his language well developed, and he says, "Hey y'all, I just wanted to let you know," with his southern accent. You're starting to really develop a character by giving him an action and having an attitude with it. And now you're going to interact with another character or another scene or another background, maybe even an object, where your southern gentleman who's walked into a 1870 bar or something similar to that, you're going to want him to walk up confidently with his little whatever shoes clicking, and you're going to want them to walk up to that bar and interact with that bartender. You're going to want them to have some kind of repertoire and some kind of conversation where you really see how this furthers the plot line. Does he discover an issue, or do they get into a brawl and they have to be broken apart by the piano player in the background? You're going to want a relationship to develop every single place. You're going to want something to further your character's journey along, because there are no characters that I can think of who go on a journey by themselves and never encounters a character or another character or another character. Otherwise, your character may be stalemate. They might be stuck in the way that the reader finds them and nothing ever develops. And you want your character interaction to really further the plot line and the character's personality. I can think of a couple of books where, for instance, Fault in Our Stars, Hazel Grace is kind of stuck inside herself. She's content on being by herself and just going through the days. But then she meets Augustus, and it really changes her personality, and she feels like breaking out and doing these things and becoming a person other than her sickness. And characters, when they interact with another character or many characters, they develop more and give the character complexity and dimension and develop for the reader and for the character themselves. So you want to think about meaningful interaction that characters encounter. You're not going to just want them to be interacting with someone for a second and that second not relate to anything else. You want it to make sense, you want it to be clear, so that the reader understands and doesn't feel that there's a waste. You don't want that. You want it to be consistent, continuously rolling. Get that reader to keep on reading. You're also going to come across inner monologue with dialogue. So your character is going to want to have conversations with themselves or just thoughts. If you have a character who's torn between two issues, should I stay or should I go? You could have your character's inner thoughts become outer thoughts and show the torment that the character is going through. Inside mentally, that little war breaks out and they're ending up talking to themselves aloud, and that can show your character's distraught and angst and inability to control their choices. And you also want inner monologue to reveal something. These may be things that the character discovers on their own. For instance, if your character is on a journey to feed someone and they come across little clues, but they're by themselves. They haven't come across their other person that they're with, their partner in crime, or they are split searching in different teams. You could have your character think, is this it? Is this what I'm seeing? Is that red jewel up in that tree exactly what I need? I don't want to call out, but I want to think about it. Maybe I should go look. Things like that will give the reader like, ooh, go look. Like that could be it too. It gives them some insight on what they should be thinking about, what will be coming up, foreshadowing. A lot of times inner monologue shows the character where they're going to be or what they're going to be doing, which is very, very important. You want to really show the reader that these things are important, so relevance is going to be key. Now, unless your character is supposed to be harebrained and distracted and constantly out of focus, I think that's when you would want your character's inner monologue to be a little bit scattered, including things that don't really have a relevance to a main plot line, but will show its character's personality, which is very good. So there are many ways you can take inner monologue and change it so that your character really shines through and your reader really sees that personality. Also, you want to think about character habits. So they have actions and how they do their actions, and how they speak and the language that they use, and how they interact with other people through those actions and that dialogue. And then you see the character from who they are on the inside with that inner monologue. But habits and hobbies really do show a character. You can start off with having a character who's devoted their entire life to football, everything football, wears cleats to bed, wakes up in grass-stained clothes, dirty nails from hiking that pigskin across the field and clawing his way up when he couldn't run anymore, and he's on his knees just trying to get across that field one last time in that practice run. You could describe his habits, his hobbies, how he watched every NFL episode over and over again on ESPN, listened to every review of a talk show, multiple reruns of those things. And then you can have your character lose that habit or that hobby, or use that to further a plot point where change is going to occur, or a character can pick up a hobby that will change the course of their life. I read a book once where a character who was clean cut, straight as an arrow, but then he picked up these bad habits and bad hobbies from people that he interacted with, and he started to tumble down this bad path of just tormenting himself and ruining his life and giving good things up for all these bad things. And it really furthered the plot line. You showed the character developing in a way that is undesirable for a reader. Like, no, just stop doing that. But it really gives it another dimension. So not only is everything up until now important, but you gotta think, this person exists in my mind and I want it to exist in writing. And they're gonna be well developed and a full person, and everyone has a habit or hobby. And you want to include that. It gives a reader a better way to connect to a character because you see them as people rather than the two-dimensional print on a paper kind of thing. Also, character possessions are really important too. Not only do they have habits and hobbies, but they might also have possessions that really further their lives. Augustus in The Fault in Our Stars had cigarettes, and for him it was a really big deal because he was dealing with cancer and how cancer is uncontrollable and he was going to die from it. But cigarettes are a controlled death, and he would put those cigarettes in between his lips and he would say, you just don't light them. But the thing is that possession showed you that Augustus was fighting an unbeatable fight against something that's not tangible. But he was hoping that it could be controlled. And that gives the reader a deeper understanding of the character, which is so important. So very important. Like, all these things are very important, but these little things like possessions and hobbies and habits give just a little bit more to the reader and really shows that these characters further other characters, further to the plot line, and like further a meaning within the reader. I also had a novel in which the narrator was obsessed with vampires and vampirism and was just obsessed and decorated her room with them and did tons of research and did lots of reading. And the significance of vampires in her life was trying to understand and develop immortality based on something that makes you mortal, and that was blood. And the character was dying, and the reader could see that the person's issues were seeping into their life and their choices, and that she prized all of these things, all these books and all these research novels and all these movies because they furthered her enjoyment of finding an answer. So you have to think about those things, but then you can also think about things people don't own. If you have a character that's an orphan, that doesn't have a family, doesn't have a home, or doesn't have a sister, or once did and has lost them, those can really change a character's perception or the reader's perception on the character. If you're interested in orphan kind of tale, I once saw this movie where the little girl became an orphan and her only possession was a plant. And for her it was very significant because one, it was living, and two, it was something she could take care of. And for her as an orphan, she didn't have anyone to take care of her, and she had no one to take care of, and she found like hope and love in this plant. And when it died, it broke, the plant pot broke, she lost it. It was losing life and love and family all over again. So possessions really show something for the character that can be missing or will be missing, that provides hope or enjoyment, that furthers this understanding of what this character is like, which is pretty awesome because you want to say no one's materialistic, but characters need that material. It needs to further whatever you're doing with your character. Character description. What does the character look like? What is the character dressed as? Does the character have long, blonde dreads like Angelina Jolie in 60 Seconds? Or does the character have a long tiger tail because this character doesn't come from our world? Does this character have dark brown eyes? Or does the character have scaly skin? You want to describe what your character looks like. It's so surreal to have a character that's not well developed, and you can see that in a character that doesn't have a very good description. There are plenty of books out there where they go with a generic looking girl, but they don't give her any special description. They don't provide her with anything that makes her other than ordinary. You can have an ordinary character, one that looks like Joe or Sally, but you're going to want to give them another dimension. Is their physical appearance not the same as their inner appearance? Are they kind-hearted but they don't look like it? Are they Glenda the Good Witch looking girls that aren't actually Glenda the Good Witch on the inside? These things are really important. You want to describe your character well enough that a reader can imagine your character so that the personality is easily to visualize as well as what they physically look like, so you can connect these things in your mind as you watch them go through their journey, meeting other characters. You're going to want the characters that they encounter to be well described, maybe in an inner monologue for your main character about talking about how they look, or a dialogue where they discuss how each other looks. There are plenty of books out there where the girl's like, I'm ugly, and the guy's like, no, you're beautiful, look at those green, deep ocean eyes, or something similar, which gives the reader an understanding like, wow, she has green, deep ocean eyes. I've never seen the ocean green. So you want to see the character in your mind with good descriptions, with great descriptions, amazing descriptions that a reader can understand and visualize. And you also want to give your character background information. Where are we finding this character when we meet them? Are we meeting them after trekking 1,000 miles across a border, or are we finding them in a spaceship that's going to be crashing and they've come from Earth and this is their only hope and they're going to land in a place they don't even know about? Or are we encountering them going through flashbacks and we see them through those flashbacks? Background information doesn't have to come at the very beginning of your novel. A lot of novels will talk about the current place of the character and give you tidbits and little nuggets of information as you go along, so you can develop slowly this idea of what this character has been through. For our purposes, you might want to describe your character's background at the beginning because our narratives won't be as long as those kinds of novels. You're going to want to talk about characters' culture or characters' surroundings. Are they a 19-year-old super senior who doesn't feel very smart because they get picked on a lot by kids that are younger, and their culture is that when they go home they don't feel very great about themselves and their parents make them feel worse. Maybe they don't have parents. You want to give like this background with everything that's led up to this moment. You want to give the background with physicality. Do they have a scar? And how do they get that scar? Through their background. Or why do they have that southern drawl? But they're clearly described as someone who wouldn't typically have a southern drawl. Let's say your character's a tiger. You physically describe them as a tiger, but their language has a southern drawl. That background information is going to connect that reader to how you got to those two places. Well, this tiger is an alien from another planet that crashed into a Texan bar, and he tried to adapt, and he's got a camouflage on him, but he's adapted the language so that he says y'all and good too, things like that. Background information connects those things. Also, background information for how characters interact with one another. Are they brother and sister? Is that why they banter and beat each other up with their actions? Or are they former lovers who only are no longer lovers because they were pulled apart and they had to write to each other through letters? And now that they are together, it's so strange and weird. Background information provides the characters with something to give to the readers to help further where the reader is in this point of the plot. You really want to develop these ideas in order to create new ideas. Create a new place for your character in which they will be well developed because they'll have action, how they do things, and how they speak and interact with one another, how they communicate, how do they look, how do they do things by the way they look or how they speak or how they do things with their actions. What hobbies and habits do they have? What possessions do they own? What can be of this character? And connecting it with background information can make all those things really, really shine. I've also included a character development worksheet in which you can take different points here in order to spark some ideas about what kind of character you want if you haven't already thought of one, or if you have already thought of one, how to further their dimensions, how to further their understandings and connections that they might give readers. You're going to want this really well-developed character because they're a representation of what you can give, what you can think, and you want people to see amazing characters. And you're going to do this with well-developed ideas. These ideas can come from this worksheet. You can take ideas, be inspired by books that you've already read, things, or movies that you've seen, or people you know in real life, or just imagination. But here's a worksheet that includes a lot of really, really good ideas on how to develop a character, and then there are some ideas that are kind of tedious or minute, for instance, lefty or righty, unless that's really significant to your character, as in, does your character write with the left hand and the left hand suddenly disappears and is cut off, or it got sucked into a vortex and suddenly that hand's no longer in existence, or that left hand turns into a machine gun or a chainsaw, now I gotta write with the right hand, or something like that. Those things may not be very important to the reader. You don't want to give like a laundry list of who your character is, but you're going to want to think about certain things a little bit more than others. So that's my flipped classroom lesson for character development. I hope that it has inspired or taught you something that you weren't quite sure about, or reassured you about things that you want to do with your character. I'll be available in class, and you will be able to ask me any questions if these PowerPoints or lecture online has not been helpful or just need some clarification. I'm available. So I hope to see you in our next